New Arts and Media Studios in Milwaukee. I'm Charles Purcell. This is The Log. We're continuing our summer review of the early months of the regime. And it continues to be a reminder that the things we were warning about, the very worst possibilities, have come to pass. The military occupation of Los Angeles and now the District of Columbia, now threatening Chicago, threatening cities across America, threatening the Insurrection Act. We talked about that. He issued an executive order on his very first day in office, talking about the possibility of utilizing the Insurrection Act, the use of state militias, use of the military, taking over local police. So in this episode from, April 14th, episode 521, we talked about his use of the Insurrection Act and, more importantly, how we should prepare. And more in the what to do category from April 17th, episode 522. More ideas on what we should be doing, boycotts and strikes right at the center of these things. And a good resource if you'd like to be a saboteur for the resistance. That's a good story I like. All right, so here now some featured clips from mid-April. Okay, martial law, the Insurrection Act. Let's talk about this. There have been several articles. You can read about this in detail. I want to discuss one in particular, what to do if the Insurrection Act is invoked. Originally published at wagingnonviolence.org. Article by Daniel Hunter. It's been reprinted in several publications. Day one of the regime signed an executive order, called for the Secretary of Defense and Homeland Security to submit a joint report. The report will offer any recommendations regarding actions the regime could take, specifically regarding the southern border. But as you and I have discussed, certainly it has everything to do with suppressing the resistance as well, especially when you consider it along with the story we talked about a couple of episodes ago, the way the federal government basically takes over the District of Columbia entirely, especially when it comes to police enforcement. So in every way, in every shape, they're preparing for and rigging the power structure to suppress any organized resistance. If the Insurrection Act, which dates back to 1807, were to be invoked, it gives the president special emergency powers, declare an emergency at the border, declare an emergency because of some sort of resistance uprising. Now the president can deploy the U.S. military against American citizens, federalize the National Guard. So this article that I'm recommending is what we need to know, how we need to prepare. Because this is not a Chicken Little scenario. This is absolutely within the realm of possibility. Many articles, many commentators, many of whom are saying, oh yeah, it's happening. So the Insurrection Act, it's an old law, goes back over 200 years. It says, in all cases of insurrection or obstruction to the laws, the President of the United States can call forth the militia or armed forces for the purpose of suppressing such insurrection. And I don't know this chapter and verse, but technically I should mention that this has been bolstered over the years. And technically now it's a series of statutes in Title 10 of the U.S. Code. Okay? The term insurrection is not defined precisely anywhere in the code. At best, they just call it, quote, unlawful obstructions, combinations, or assemblages or rebellions. So anything they decide. As if they wouldn't do that anyway, just like they can label anybody a terrorist. They just decide. Now, the Supreme Court has upheld that the president alone can decide the meaning of these words. It could weigh in, but that's unlikely. You may remember from your history classes, your civics classes, the Posse Comitatus Act. It blocks the military from being involved in civilian law enforcement. Well, that's gone under the Insurrection Act. That's suspended. The role of the military is to, quote-unquote, assist civilian authorities, but not replace them. So it's technically not martial law, but again, those are just words on paper when it comes to this regime. We know through recent history and reporting what the regime wanted to do during the Black Lives Matter protests, as is so often the case and often mentioned in the first administration. Thank God there were people around him able to stop him. That's now out the window, of course. So by declaring the Insurrection Act, now no holds are barred. Door-to-door searching for undocumented residents, Coast Guard patrolling the waters, calling the military, calling the Marines to shut down legal protests. Of course, it would all wind up in the courts, but we know how effective they've been. Now, the Insurrection Act has been used a few times, but in a very limited way and by presidents who weren't maniacs. Lincoln used it in the Civil War. Grant used it against the Ku Klux Klan. LBJ used it to end segregation in the South. Most recently, Bush Sr. invoked the Insurrection Act during the LA riots. But limited scope, limited time, again, by presidents who weren't maniacal tyrants. We're through a whole different looking glass now. Legal experts say the door is just wide open for abuse. So this Daniel Hunter, who wrote this article, joined with the Brennan Center for Justice to run kind of a game theory on this thing, a tabletop scenario. And I guess they had some pretty serious people, politicos and military experts, and they went through these possible scenarios. And when they gamed it out, there was some good news and bad news. In their simulation, the military refused to follow the orders on door-to-door raids. The military knew they couldn't interact with civilians. Good. But then, very troubling, the Judge Advocate General approved this use of the military. They very happily sent troops to the border. So in this simulation, when the military said, no, we're not going to mix it up with civilians in the street, the Orange Menace tried an end around, tried to rearrange the military so he could give direct orders to the National Guard and parts of the Army, which he reordered. He had Pete Hegseth push around like Legos. So in that scenario, he had success. Troops were ordered and they complied to work in coordination with ICE. The Orange Menace deputized right-wing militias, military contractors, and here's where it got really dangerous, really fast. Private militias got very aggressive in a hurry, shooting people trying to cross the border, getting rough with protesters. In the simulation they ran, courts were ineffective in slowing anything down. The Orange Menace continued to claim massive powers without anybody holding him back. So bottom line, this simulation was frightening. And again, these are serious people. So how should we be prepared for this? ICE is already, as we've talked about, ICE is already literally kidnapping people, green card holders, people with student visas, just a heartbeat away from doing the same with American citizens. We've talked about the steps he's taken regarding Washington, D.C., criminalizing any kind of protests within the district, the use of the Pentagon, FBI, labeling everybody a domestic terrorist, then looking for any excuse at all, any spark of violence that they may themselves ignite, then he can claim that as a pretext to expand his militaristic power more widely. The simplest way, the easiest thing to understand, would be creating violence within peaceful protests. Black Lives Matter, perfect example. We've already seen this happen. Agents infiltrating peaceful protests, creating the violence, and creating the rationale for use of state force. This is all straight out of the authoritarian playbook. The guy hasn't had an original idea his whole life. All the people behind him, the people who wrote Project 2025, they certainly know what they're doing. They got all their ducks in a row. They're ready for this. And they may well get a lot of the U.S. population on their side. They'll be able to convince a good portion of folks in the United States Oh, well, we have to crack down to restore peace. Yeah, that's what they're counting on. And they'll have some success in that area, believe me. Their propaganda game is high level. So the only way to fight that is for us to communicate an absolute commitment to order, to kindness, to non-violence. We have to be 1,000% with each other. Positive messaging, calmly explaining the likelihood of future repression in a way that reduces fear. That's a lesson I need to learn. I'm trying to do that right now. I'm trying to calmly explain the likelihood of future repression in a way that reduces fear. That's the thing I'm still working on. I got to figure this out. One of the suggestions in the article I'm recommending here, behave in ways that inspire. Mentioned just the other day, the Tesla takedown protests. There's lots of music and dancing, you know? So as we go out, these mass protests, these mass rallies, we got to have some fun. We got to sing, we got to dance. We have to show clearly our values for kindness, for camaraderie. I think that's pretty good advice. Some of us may get caught up in the violence. We have to together condemn all violence in a unified voice. If any stragglers on our side are falling into that trap, we have to call them out. We have to rein them in. And all the while condemning state-sanctioned violence, of course. We have to make it clear that the acts of violence are coming from one side. The kidnapping of protesters, the assaults to the Constitution. We have to, in every way possible, depict ourselves as the good guys. And we have to act in a way that we deserve that depiction. We decry all violence and Trump's attempts to divide us. We are a peaceful people who want freedom. If he uses the Insurrection Act, the only ways to constrain him are largely through public pressure, hopefully a reluctant military, and the courts. God bless them. We keep counting on the courts. How long can they keep coming through for us? The author points to 3 strategies of public pressure: refusal, resistance, and ridicule. Few of us have the power or the wherewithal to encourage the military's refusal to obey unethical orders. The military is the most top-down institution in our society. But still, officers within the military are positioned to gum up the works. We've seen some of this happening already. Some veterans are leading the way, talking to folks in the military. More of that's going to be needed by those in a position to influence the military. One idea they came up with in their scenario planning sessions, there's a technicality that the National Guard cannot be activated twice. So, as a preemptive move, governors could activate their National Guard, and then the federal government will then be unable to repurpose them. So that's a little into the weeds, but that's something that state governments can consider. So, governors, any governors listening, or anyone who might want to write a letter to your governor, remind them, you know what, if you call up the National Guard right away, put them on the job doing something useful, the feds can't touch them. I didn't know that. That's an interesting little point. Okay, governors. So, number 1, refusal. Number 2, resistance. The good news is protests, rallies have been numerous and frequent, even more than in 2017. Press coverage is lousy, but the fact is, we're out there. We've got to keep it up. And within that resistance, it's got to be more than just carrying a sign and chanting and hollering, right? Seminars, trainings, know your rights trainings, learning about protest law, learning about your rights as a protester. We mentioned Pramila Jayapal has some trainings going on. Go to her website. You can find a local one. Others are doing the same. Also, we want to document everything. If we're going to claim our constitutional rights, and if some of this is going to wind up in the courts, we're going to need evidence. So video everything for your own protection, for the inevitable court cases that might arise. Share them in your socials for stoking public outrage. So document, document, document. The writer points to Portland when the regime really cracked down back in 2020. Remember the unmarked vans? Yeah, documenting these abductions was key. And all the while, we have to continue with a simple message. We are not violent. The regime is violent. We are not violent. And then we have to live up to that promise. Now, in the opinion of this writer, ask the question, should those of us concerned about Trump's actions organize a mass protest right after an insurrection act is ordered? He says no. He's thinking no. Rushing to the streets with future fears, especially if his order is somewhat targeted, will likely backfire. And if we hit the streets, all the more excuse for him to hit us. So I'm not sure how I feel about this. I'm going to have to think about it a little bit. I have been saying now for weeks that it's possible that the street rallies and protests might have to take a back seat to more powerful national strikes and boycotts. You and I have talked about that quite a lot, and I still believe that. And then finally, the writer of this article, Daniel Hunter, his third category is ridicule, which kind of surprised me. But he goes on kind of at length about the great need for ridicule, for humor, for pranks, for fun. I guess I'm with him on this. There was that hack, remember, into government offices where they showed that AI video of Trump and Musk, and Trump was kissing Musk's feet. Remember that AI video? It was really gross. I couldn't look at it. But Hunter says, quote, humor is important for our psyches and to take fascists down a notch. Beautiful Trouble reports on the clandestine insurgent rebel clown army, one example he gives, trained by professional clowns who filled their pockets with so much strange junk that it took hours and lots of paperwork when stop and searches occurred. Humor is key for morale and exposing the vulnerability of the strong man image. Calling for lots of street theater. This part of it, I'll say, surprised me, especially as one of three main points he wanted to close with. But okay, that's what he had to say. So we'll leave it at that. Once again, what should we do if Trump invokes the Insurrection Act, as he may well do? And again, I point you to wagingnonviolence.org, wagingnonviolence.org, author Daniel Hunter. We often hear the conversation about, what would it take for you to change your mind about the regime? If you voted for him, what's it going to take? Or if you didn't vote for him, what's it going to take for you to hit the streets? What's it going to take for you to really do something? What's your red line? Have they crossed a red line for you? Well, they crossed a red line for me long, long ago. Has he finally crossed yours? Concentration camps? The complete and utter defiance of federal court orders and even the Supreme Court? Every American with a conscience, I believe, has to make this their thing right now. Pro-democracy resistance. Loud defiance of the regime. I mean, come on. Men and women of previous generations have devoted their lives. Many lost their lives to save the nation. Each one of us today has the moral duty to serve this cause, each as they are able. We've tried to put the focus on this program on what we can do. Not just on the news, not just on trying to convince you how bad things are, and especially not just sort of almost taking pleasure in wringing our hands and clutching our pearls about how terrible everything is. A lot of media really just loves to bury themselves in all of that. We've tried to focus on what we can do. So if you're out there on the streets, I thank you. If you're participating in the boycotts, if you're writing letters to your representatives, if you're conducting any sort of disruptive activism, whatever you're doing, that's great. I thank you. But we also have to be honest. As I said on Monday, the regime is working with a pace and an energy that we are not matching up till now. We're often reminded in these stories that the federal courts, even the Supreme Court, they can't enforce their rulings. Normally, the U.S. Marshals would enforce court orders, something like a perjury charge. But of course, the U.S. Marshals fall under the jurisdiction of Pam Bondi and her Department of Justice, so-called. So it keeps coming back to this. Well, the courts have no army. How do they enforce? We are the court's army. We have to enforce these rulings. How? Well, an uptick of what we've been doing. Instead of filling the streets once every couple of Saturdays, we go out there right now. I mean, shoot, Bernie and AOC had tens of thousands of people in Boise, Idaho on a Monday night. We need 1,000 of those every night. If you haven't written a letter, if you haven't written an email, if you haven't made a phone call, do it today, now, right now. And then what else? Well, what hurts the Orange Menace? What hurts the enablers of the regime? Think of it and do it. I've been advocating for boycotts and strikes. Withhold your consumer dollar. Withhold your labor. They need it. They count on it. It's their life's blood to extract from you your money and your labor. Some of these get into a little more long-term, and I've been today talking about immediate short-term emergencies. But thinking mid and long-term, the boycotts and strikes need to be central. Think about how you spend your money. Think about your job. If you're just a cog in this evil machine that filters money from all of us to the top 1%, get out when you can. I'm not asking you to quit tomorrow. I know you have responsibilities, but you better start devising a plan on how you get out of that. And as far as the boycotts go, I've been asking for a while. Start them today and make them permanent. You're not giving up anything you need. If you really need a car, you could put that off for a year, I'll bet. And as I often say, zero judgment. You make your own decision. If you feel like you absolutely need something, I'm not going to judge you. But I am suggesting that all of us close our wallets indefinitely. We'll be better off the junk we buy anyway. Better off economically, better off psychically, emotionally. We've talked at length on this program about mutual aid. Let's get that going. Let's help each other. And here's where things can get really positive also. Calling for boycotts of corporate products. The way I think about that, I'm not thinking that's asking for a sacrifice at all. Instead of laying your $20 down for seeing the next dopey corporate superhero movie, go to the local thrift store, buy a couple of board games, everybody get together, have a game night with your friends. Have a what they call a pantry party. Just see what's in your pantry that you can bring and cook up for a party. Everything you do that costs zero money, if you're doing it with friends and family, I contend will be more satisfying, more exhilarating, more fun than anything you can buy. So let's just make that our lifestyle for the duration until the Orange Menace and his regime have fallen. Again, I don't think I'm asking us to give up anything. I think we'll all gain from the experience. I honestly believe that. Please don't laugh because this is not intended to be funny. I think everybody who can should plant a victory garden. Everybody in the suburbs can do it. Most people in the city can do it. You got a little patch of land. And if you don't have anything, most cities have community gardens. I've got one. I'm looking at it right now, right out my window. Here in Milwaukee, we have community gardens. Every city has community gardens. There are, I've mentioned this before, we have Buy Nothing groups on social media. Join a Buy Nothing group. You need something, you go there, you find it, you go get it. You list things that you're giving away, and it's not trading, it's not bartering. Take what you need, give what you can. And then I love this one. I'm going to recommend a site for you. Open Culture, which is a great resource if you're not familiar with Open Culture. You can download the CIA's Simple Sabotage Field Manual, a timeless guide to subverting any organization with purposeful stupidity. It's a guide to sabotage. Now, this was published way back in 1944, but it's so much fun to read, and there are so many things that are applicable to our situation today. So be a saboteur. There are lots of ways to just muddy up the works. While you're trying to get out of your awful corporate job, there are lots of ways that you can be a saboteur from within. So I love that idea about using sort of we need to use guerrilla tactics that disrupt. I'll let you look that up and read it. It's fantastic. There have been several articles written about this, and again, Open Culture has the download. The CIA's Simple Sabotage Field Manual, a timeless guide to subverting any organization with purposeful stupidity. So go get it. As I always say, zero violence, nonviolence, always, always nonviolent. And if you're going to technically break a law, that puts you into the realm of civil disobedience. I'm not calling for that. I am telling you, if you decide to engage in civil disobedience, be prepared to get caught and pay the fine or serve the sentence. That's what civil disobedience is. So I'm not telling you to do it, but I am telling you that if you decide to do it, accepting the punishment is part of the deal. So go in with your eyes wide open. But above all, we've crossed the red line. Certainly they have for me. Everybody draws their own red line. They decide where it is. If they haven't crossed it for you, I don't know what else to tell you. I want to close this little section with a quote from Alexei Navalny, the late great Russian dissident. By the way, there's another great word you can start using. Proudly proclaim yourself an American dissident. Here's the quote from Alexei Navalny. Don't be afraid of anything. This is our country, and it's the only one we have. The only thing we should fear is that we will surrender our homeland to be plundered by a gang of liars, thieves, and hypocrites. That we will surrender without a fight, voluntarily, our own future and the future of our children. Alexei Navalny. You've been listening to a best-of episode of The Log featuring clips from April 14th and 17th, episodes 521 and 522. Find all episodes at the website, charlesburcell.com, or on your favorite podcast platform. Follow on Substack and Blue Sky. Thanks to our home station, River West Radio in Milwaukee. Peter Donalds wrote and performed our theme song. All right, I love you. See you out there.